Salutations, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good night, and a very good welcome to you, wherever you are, whoever you are, and what your dreams in life are. My name is Thomas Sheridan, and this is episode number 26, I believe, of The Velocity of Now. It's the 19th of January 2014, and I hope you're not freezing to death wherever you are. It seems to be quite a severe winter. It's still continuing in some places. My website is thomassheridanarts.com. Anything you can do there to help me would be great. The Kindle version, not my decision, the publisher's decision, of Defeated Demons should be out shortly. So those of you that didn't want to read the paperback version, that will be available in the next couple of weeks or so. Plenty of articles on my website. My blog is constantly updated. I had some good articles today, last few days. One about the mysterious circumstances surrounding the death of the first AC/DC singer, Bon Scott, who I actually saw not long before, with AC/DC, not long before we lost him. Tremendous singer. I believe he was murdered, and it's easily a case for manslaughter there too. I also have an article on the Queen's Master of the Swans, or Marker of the Swans. In this age of cutbacks and financial austerity, it's good to know that the monarchy still pays somebody to partake, operate, function over, and administer their swan rituals. And he's got a lovely red jacket and a funny hat with a swan feather in it. You can sleep safe at night. Freeze to death because you don't have the money to pay for your heating, but never mind. The Marker of the Swan still has his job. And there's another article in there talking about the TV show, Benefit Street, which I'll talk about later in the show today. Now, I wasn't here last week, so the guys, Steve is also producing tonight and running the music, I think it was the best of show. Nick, was Steve and Nick, I think, did that. So thank you guys for looking after that while I'm away, and thank you, Steve, for looking after things tonight. Now, I was in Norway, and I was over there doing a series of talks. It was actually two-hour talks over 2 nights in Stavanger, and I've uploaded the first hour and a half of the eventual 4-hour talks onto YouTube, so you can check them out at Thomas Sheridan Arts on YouTube. Now, this is my third time to Norway in the last year and a half, I think, or maybe 2 years. And it's an interesting country, and I recorded some footage there, and I went around doing the talks, and I was hanging out with some old friends, and it was a really nice time. But it's an interesting country in many ways. It reminds me a lot of Ireland, actually. It's Ireland with higher mountains. Actually, a lot of the countryside, a lot of the stone walls and the green fields. And the seascapes, it's not a million miles in the west of Ireland. Just the mountains out there are a bit taller. But I was, going around the coast and exploring it, and it struck me the biggest difference between their coastline and our coastline is the massive amount of industry on the Norwegian coastline. It's dedicated to the oil business, the oil exploration business in the North Sea, because that's really what has made Norway an economic powerhouse in recent times, the last 20 years. And there's a whole, I'm sure it's the same on the Scottish side of the sea, there's a whole need for ancillary and support industries. Everything from, helicopters to drilling equipment is needed. And it seems that every harbour that can land the ship has been developed into a working support place for the oil industry. Ireland has probably more oil than Norway and Scotland. In fact, the Rockefeller family wrote a report back in the 60s, I believe. They said that Ireland has more oil off its west coast than all the Gulf states put together, with the exception of Saudi Arabia. And it was reckoned to be the largest reserve of crude oil in the world outside the Middle East. And of course, the Rockefeller family suggested in the document, it's in a book, I can't remember the title of it right now, but it's literally banned in Ireland, this book. It's passed around like something out of the Cold War in Russia. And the book states quite clearly that the oil industry in the United States suggested a NATO invasion of Ireland if the Irish government tried to nationalise the oil industry. Now, the Norwegians nationalised their oil industry, and they got away with it because they have a royal family. There's something about royal families that if you have oil and you have a royal family, be it Saudi Arabia, be it Bahrain, you're safe. If you are a republic, well, they'll come after you with the weapons. Well, anyway, that was Norway is a very nice country, very nice people, but by God, is it very expensive. That's the other side of discovering enormous oil reserves. They pay very high taxes for very good social services too. But it's an interesting country, like I said. I spoke to some local conspiracy people, and I was told what was the prevailing conspiracy regarding the Andres Breivik, that piece of shit who went onto that island, blew a bomb off in the Parliament buildings, and then went onto the island allegedly alone and shot up all those kids from their left-wing party. The sort of prevailing conspiracy theory of that one is big business interests within Norway were trying to get the king to abdicate. What they were after was they were trying to create a constitutional crisis, get the king to abdicate, and implement a republic. When you're a republic, what does that mean when you have oil? They come after you. The King of Norway is apparently very well liked by the people. He's not like the Saxe Gotha crowd in England. He seems to be, him and his father were quite popular. They seem to be more laid back kind of people, less ostentatious. But they're also the head of the armed forces in Norway, and Norway spends more per capita on military than I think any country in the world. They've got like a very good air force, plenty of weaponry, and they could put up a fight if they were ever attacked. And that's probably a good thing. The pacifist in me says, war is wrong, but the practical person in me that shows what happens to you when you have oil says they're probably not making a bad decision at all there. It's probably a good decision. I also spent time there researching for our next project, a little bit on the side, visiting, I know it's going to sound strange, underground SS bunkers and Nazi airfields, and I even retraced the route flown by the Nazi paratroopers from Frankfurt to Stavanger when they were taking part in the invasion of Norway, which was an interesting story in itself, because one of the reasons Norway is very heavily militarized is because the socialist government, Russell Brand's, socialist spiritual government type situation, which were actually hardcore communists that were running the country, deliberately disarmed the Norwegian military and ran it down into the ground prior to World War II, because they were trying to encourage a Soviet invasion from the north. Norway has a border with the Soviet Union. And it all went wrong, and what they got was the fascists from Germany invading instead. So that's one of the reasons Norwegians, have spent money on defense ever since, because they realize that stuff might be needed when fascists or communists or whatever are attacking your country. The project I'm working on for the next book, I think, will surprise a lot of people, but I'm really excited about it. It's really intense research, and more shall be revealed in the months and weeks to come. And I think a lot of people will find it very interesting. Now, that was Norway. So I had a great time there. I met some lovely people, and an interesting and a very, very nice country. I would encourage anyone who wants to think of visiting to go visit it. But bring plenty of money. That's what I'd say about that. So what else has been going on lately? Well, the People's Voice. I don't want to call it a fiasco, because I'm not privy to what goes on behind the scenes there. And I'm not going to prejudge, what goes on in people's minds. But I will say this, that I'm not surprised on some levels. I don't have a wish for the station to collapse or anything like that, like I see some people do. And I've no malice against David Icke, because I actually think he's a decent fella inside. I don't think he's a bad man. However, I think there are problems that manifested in the People's Voice that are perhaps a result of issues in his own personality. I'm not psychoanalyzing the guy, that may have not helped the situation. Let's put it that way. Now, when the station was first announced it was coming out, I was initially skeptical. And I was initially skeptical for the reason that we don't need a central command structure within this movement. We just don't. In fact, I believe the powers that be would want a central command, one big station, because I think what gives this movement its power is the fact that we're all scattered and diverse. And even holding conflicts, I don't believe unity would be unity under a common manifesto or a common constitution or even a common editorial slant, as they use in the mainstream media, propaganda really, would be a good thing. In fact, I think it would be a disaster actually, because we're much easier to catch when we're marching in file than when we're a bunch of insurgents running around in different directions. That makes us very difficult to catch. And this is a very frustrating thing for the political structures who are doing everything to try and co-opt this movement. They want us back in the traditional left-wing groups because they're ultimately all feeding back into the system, whether it be the Socialist Workers' Party or any other of the similar groups, the climate camps and so on, that ultimately feed the system. And they do not want this movement as dispersed as it is. And when you get all the ducks in a row, then you can swim those ducks back into where you want them, as the purple pill, as I have called it. Now, the first inkling of that for me was the Bilderberg Fringe Festival, which was an abomination, really. I mean, that was, the way I would describe that would be the chickens protesting Colonel Sanders by jumping into the family bucket. That's what that was. You don't go to a festival and have a party atmosphere worshipping your superstars of truth while the Bilderbergers are giving extra peace and quiet and can do extra work in the hotel in Watford, if they're even there. They were even there. And that was, to me, was an inkling, especially with the people behind it, the Charlie Skelton and the usual Cambridge, government-sanctioned groups running it, that this is what they were after. Russell Brand has played a major part in that as well. He has spellbound all the starstruck truthers and New Age people, and they're all following him like the Pied Piper, and then the critical thinking is switched off because that's what they want. They're desperate for validation, but what they're getting is assimilation, re-assimilation back into the system. And the People's Voice, I don't believe it was started for that reason, but I believe the powers that be were very happy when it did, because suddenly the ducks were lining up in one row, and that was the main reason initially that I was against the idea. Following that, a lot of people, I quite like their work and what they have to say and do, and I like some of them personally too, as people started signing up for positions within the People's Voice. And then I just said, look, there's no harm in it if the information stays true to what the individual presenters and researchers are after. And then what's the harm anyway? What's the harm? So I just said, well, good luck to them. I hope it works out for them. And then as the station took off, I was quite surprised at the amateurness of it. It didn't look... Now, people have said to me, well, they're trying to not look slick and mainstream, but they bought an awful lot of expensive mainstream equipment. And secondly, you could, they throw the devil's advocate out there. They would say things like, well, if it looked really slick and professional and came across as professional, someone would say it was getting money from, shall we say, interested parties. But that wouldn't have mattered with the People's Voice. That would have been irrelevant at that point, because we know where the money came from. It came from donations from people who wanted to support the station. So there was no funny money involved. We know where it came from. So the People's Voice really had a mandate to do a slick production that would have wooed in people who would be used to slick productions to see it. And I think the fact that it looked amateurish, there seemed to be always technical problems. The graphic design was often appalling. I mean, really bad. Really bad. Whoever's, people behind the artistic or the graphic look of that station wouldn't get a job in anywhere that was professional. And then it was the first thing to me that there was a bit of a, shall we say, not very professional behind the scenes. Now, this lack of professionalism is a problem. Yes, you can sit there and say, oh, we don't want to be like a big corporation. We want to be different. But at the end of the day, professionalism, it does matter. It does. Because it ultimately guarantees the survival of the project. Now, Type 1, where I'm here on with the Velocity of Now, myself and the guys are not, slick businessmen, and the ladies, sorry, my part. We're not like that. But we do our best to make sure that this all works, looks good, sounds good, feels good, and everything arrives on time. There's effort put in there. So there's a professional effort in terms of competence is put in with the very, very limited resources and time we have. We all have lives, families, and incomes to do, but we do our best. Some people who have more time, more resources, and have been doing it for longer, like Red Ice, like Chris Everard's, what his station is called, they do great work. They look like $1 million bucks. And even Infowars, you have to hand it to them. They produce something that looks very slick, even though most of the stuff on it is just fear mongering. You can't fault the look of it. So it seemed to me that was it suggested a problem behind the scenes. Then that lady, Sonia Poulton, who got their biggest ever guest on the air, Keith Allen, who the actor, film producer, so on, quite famous person on this side of the world. He was on talking about his film about the murder of Princess Diana. And I was looking at that show and thinking, excuse me, maybe they're onto something. Maybe this woman or this show is a chance to be their flagship program to really push the thing forward. And I have to say I was quite impressed. Next thing you know, that woman leaves, and there's a press statement that it issued on the People's Voice Facebook page that was appalling. It was absolutely appalling. I don't know who wrote it. Okay, I'm not going. Someone said that David Icke may have written it, but I don't know that for sure. Well, whoever wrote it wrote basically everything you shouldn't do. If I was to say to someone, if you're involved in a professional situation and there's a blowout or a falling out, this press statement on the People's Voice page is precisely how you do not do it. That's how you do not do it. You don't start by attacking the person. You just say, no matter what went on behind the scenes, okay, whether it's a band, a company, a government thing, a charity, if you're pulling each other's eyeballs out and literally killing each other behind the scenes, that never goes public. What you say is, when the split happens, that we had differences that could not be resolved and issues that could not be overcome, and we're splitting and going our separate ways, and we wish each other well, and that's the end of it. Instead, we got something that was almost like an infantile tirade. And I think that shocked a lot of people. And that alerted a lot of people to the fact that behind the scenes, there may be a kind of a Keystones Cop operation going on. Especially as they seem to have problems with financial budgeting. It started at 100,000, it went to 300,000. That's okay. You can push to the next level. And now they need more and more money. You don't solve problems. Look, I mean, let's think about this for a second, right? 2008, when the banks were failing, right? What was the number one statement that people in the alternative movement said, including David Icke's people? You don't solve the dysfunctionality with the banking system by throwing more money at it. So what's happening with the People's Voice right now? The underlying issues do not seem to be addressed, And the same thing is happening, throwing more money at it. This is not going to elicit confidence. Now, let me just sit back here now, okay? This is me, Thomas Sheridan, talking to the People's Voice people. I know they don't listen to me. They don't know who I am. But if they were, they consider this as someone schooled in corporate communications, giving you free consultation on how to get out of this issue, okay, and keep your station going, okay? Firstly, volunteerism doesn't work when you're dealing with big bucks. That's why charities pay people a salary. That's why churches, even, and religious institutions pay people a salary. Because if you have volunteers working for nothing, you're encouraging them to get down there, especially in light of this situation. You know the old expression, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys? Well, if you pay nothing, don't expect to get professionals, because that's what will happen. And you're going to have people arriving there who are clever and talented people who genuinely want the station to succeed, and who may well have good technical or creative resources, and they're there for all the right reasons, doing all the right things, okay? But that's not also who you're going to get. You're going to get to see the people who are really in your fan base too. And I believe that's what David Icke is discovering. And what he's discovering that people in his fan base, these volunteers, are showing up. Although many would be generally reliable and sincere people, men wheeling, you're going to get loafers, starstruck potheads, freemen stealing stuff because it's all a fiction. Others thought they dare to hit on the new age women who'd be there, and that's a recipe for disaster, okay? Even if they're not like that, and if you have that many volunteers, you will get a couple of bad apples. These bad apples will wreck everything. Because psychopaths, when they sniff an opportunity for free and there's no checks and balances on them, they'll be in there sniffing around, seeing what they can steal, rob, and manipulate. That's the first reason you pay people. Even if you can only pay one person, paying one competent professional person is better than having 100 volunteers. Even if it means you're only on the air 1 hour a day, you've got 1 hour a day of security that cannot be tampered with. Secondly, and this is an important one, if you have people who are skilled there, who are decent people, and they see a throughput of cash in excess of £500,000 by some estimates at this point, and they're working 5, 10, 15 hours a day for free, they're going to generate resentments. They're going to hear about all this cash coming in, and eventually they're going to say, I deserve some of this, I need some of this. And they do. They're right to have this. And this generates a sense of begrudging, resentment, an unhappy workplace. And these toxic things have to be taken care of earlier on. That's why you have to pay people a salary. And you have to pay people who produce a salary. You cannot throw 100 people in a building with technical resources, a load of cash, and expect it to happen. It's the 100 monkeys with the typewriter trying to write Shakespeare. It's not going to happen. And this is what's happening with the People's Voice. From my outside looking in, I don't know for sure what goes on in there. I'm not going to psychoanalyze the people in there. But I think that what's happened now is that David Icke has probably realized that he's rolled the dice one too many. He did very well getting as far as the Wembley gig, and that really should have been his triumphant end. And after that, do a few talks here and there, write a few books. But unfortunately, the man still, from what I'm seeing, has this vendetta with the BBC. And he wants to start a television studio, even after telling us for years that television was the biggest machine in the corner for hypnotizing people. And that's okay, because I've always been a firm proponent of the fact that we use their tools against them. That's why I think it's the great way to do this stuff, is to put this knowledge into music. And that's all good, okay? But you've got to start off walking at a steady pace and not running into chaos. And I think what happened was he rolled the dice, and this time it hasn't worked out. There's money problems. You can see the recent videos where he's on TV saying, give us money or, the human race is finished without the people's voice. Screams of a man who's close to a nervous breakdown. So for his own sake, he needs to pull away from this project. He needs to get a small number of people in there who are competent, reliable, and very importantly, are paid for the jobs they do. Volunteerism only works when you really care about something, but in a small setting. But when you're dealing with a professional, big money, and something that has high costs, I'm sure their broadband costs are enormous. You've got to be as professional as possible, even if you're only on the air 1 hour a day. And there's one more aspect of this that's important. David Icke, after rallying against the whole idea that, these elite families look after themselves, is giving jobs to his families and friends or positions within the station. I don't think that's a good move. It screams of nepotism, even if it isn't, and even if these people are nice people and good at what they're doing. And this is after him saying that he had a hands-off approach. There's a lack of professionalism that's screaming off that station. And having people on the People's Voice page saying, on the Facebook pages, attacking anyone who points this out is not going to save it, any more than throwing extra cash is going to save it. The money that they've received for that station is gigantic. It's gigantic by the standards of this movement. There's enough there to hire proper people, get them in there, and get them doing this work on a small scale and build the station up. It seems now, and I do genuinely hope I'm wrong, but it seems like the writing is on the wall now, because you cannot run a station based on a philosophical mindset that it's a holographic universe, money isn't real, and everything works out. It's not going to happen. Whether we like it or not, and regardless of the fact this holographic matrix is true or not true, scientists tell us it's true, we're still trapped in this reality, and this flesh, blood and bones reality. And the first thing I would do is I'd go down there and I would start to get rid of a lot of the volunteers. I would look for ones who were competent in terms of their craft, video editors, those kinds of people, computer people, and pay them a salary. Get rid of all the others, all the hangers-on, all the loafers, all the speculators, and trim down the station to producing original output, even if it's only 1 hour a day, saving your broadband costs, and get David Icke out of the actual philosophical management of the show. So, or whoever was behind that statement attacking Sonia Poulton, and whatever happened on behind the scene is irrelevant. You don't do that if you're a professional. And then maybe there's a chance for her. But right now, throwing money at it is the same thing as what they did to the banks in 2008. And it's not going to work, because unlike governments, we cannot print, and the supporters cannot print money indefinitely. So that's not me attacking the David Icke and the People's Voice. That's me you consider me a free consultant who knows what he's talking about, giving you some friendly advice of how to keep the ship afloat, because there are good people on it, and I would like to see their careers move and take off. And the first step towards that is running it like a professional operation. And now we're going to go to the first song, and this is Papa Adosio and Methods of Control. And that was Papadosio and Methods of Control. Superb track. First of 3 new songs we're adding to the Velocity of Now playlist tonight. So thank you for all the people who submitted your songs to that thread on the Facebook page. And that's a big ethos here as well. We're also giving you an open mic or an open sound process to people who want to get their unsigned or independent bands out there. I believe we have a caller on the line. Is there a caller there, Steve?
Yeah, area code 540.
540, so it's in America, I'm assuming. Hello, caller. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can
Hello.
indeed. Hello.
Hello.
A lady with the American accent. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. Welcome to the show. What would you like to talk about?
Oh, there's so many things that I would love to talk about with you. It's Kira.
Oh, Kira. Hiya, Kira. Kira from,
Hey.
what's the name of your blog again? Psychopaths?
In Charge.
Psychopaths in Charge. A blog I highly recommend. You work for the U.S. government, so you're deep in the matrix.
Yes, so I like to call it the psychopath incubator.
The psychopath.
You don't get ahead unless you exhibit psychopathology. You don't get anywhere in the government.
That's why civil servants are at the top of the psychopathology scale. Not because people who work for the government are psychopaths, civil servants and the public servants, but because psychopaths look at a government job as basically a free life, because I don't know how it is in the United States, but in Ireland it's almost impossible to get fired from a government job.
Right. Well, in America, if you're not in the management, you can get fired for anything. You know, any ridiculous thing, they'll fire it for you. But once you're in management, then you're untouchable. And you'd have to kill somebody really and get caught to get fired once you're in management. But the people who aren't in management, you can get fired for doing what everybody else does. You know, just if they target you, you're in trouble. So
that's even worse for the psychopaths. Worse for the rest of us. The psychopath, all they have to do is go into the government job, brown nose the managers.
Exactly. And they have the roadmap.
And wait for their turn. Yeah, that's not. Yeah,
they have
all
a
they have to
perfect
do
roadmap.
And then you have them all clustering at the top.
Right. And in my facility, there is this anti-education blacklist. If you walk in there with any type of advanced degree, you are immediately blacklisted because all of the people in charge are only have a high school diploma. So anybody who comes in there who has a college degree or anything further than that is feared, hated, and destroyed.
Because they don't want to disrupt the equilibrium of mediocrity that runs the show.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And that would probably also include the people that have a high school diploma and are otherwise very creative, dynamic, and have good ideas. I'm sure they would be rattled out. Yeah. Absolutely.
And it should be where anybody who has, good ideas and good skills is going to go to the top, but that's not what's going on. It looks like they're trying to change it because they're changing all of the head people around. They're all going to different departments, but it's just going to be more of the same. I gave them mountains of evidence about what happened to me, and I couldn't afford a lawyer, so they just said, well, we don't see anything, because they're paid not to see anything. So my next step is, I don't know. I don't know.
Institutional gaslighting.
Yep. It's horrible. And what we do, we just help people. I work for FEMA, so when, your underwear are in the tree and your house is, down the river, that's when we come in and help you. And it's really funny to see all the conspiracy theories out there about FEMA, because none of those are the actual conspiracy theories that are going on inside FEMA. The real conspiracy is far scarier. It's not that you're going to be sent to a prison camp. It's that your money is going to be spent on bullshit instead of getting your house back together quickly. It's going to be spent on some huge, ridiculous project that doesn't do anything for anyone.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because I always thought that those FEMA camp conspiracies were just like so overblown and so ridiculous. I never ever believed them. And there was also my favorite one was the FEMA trains, which are just basic car transporters used that were, as I'm kind of interested in trains and railroads, I knew that those cars were, for the reason why they got chains in them is to chain down SUVs, and the reason why they're all sheeted over is to stop people from throwing bricks and rocks at the cars when they're going through neighborhoods. And
the whole thing about the coffins, or Have you heard that one? That FEMA's got a bunch of
I've heard about it, but
coffins?
what's the real story with them boxes?
Well, one of the benefits that's available to every American whose family has been into a federally declared disaster is funeral benefits. So if you lose somebody in a federally declared disaster, one of your benefits is funeral expenses. And so that could be part of that. I don't know why else they would have them, but that's just a benefit that's available to every American.
Well, but there's also the biggest problem I had with that story was there's simply there's 400 million people in America. There's not 400 million FEMA coffins.
Exactly.
There wasn't. Yeah. There just wasn't those numbers. Even God forbid a small disaster, say a river bursting in Spanx, there wasn't enough coffins in any of those videos. And you add up all the counts together to take care of a small city being damaged.
And FEMA has to be ready for anything. Absolutely any type of disaster, FEMA has to be ready for it. So there's a bunch of bureaucrats sitting around, well, gee, what could happen? What should our plan be? And so, the real conspiracy is we're not prepared.
And their plan B would be grandiose projects that don't do anything for anyone, rather than the practical thing of getting somebody back home.
Right. And the thing is we have to work with insurance companies. So insurance companies, they do whatever they want, whenever they want, to whoever they want. And so the government and insurance companies working together, it just doesn't happen. People wait forever. They wait forever to get their, because we can't double pay them. So if their insurance company is going to pay them something for, their door falling off or their basement getting flooded, or we can't pay them, so we have to wait for insurance. Well, insurance in these big, huge disasters, they say, oh, well, we're backed up because there's hundreds of thousands of people, And so we wait for them, and it's just a big waiting game. And that's why people hate FEMA because...
And we know psychopaths thrive in chaos.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've never encountered a workplace where there was more psychopaths than here. And I've worked pretty much doing everything. I've tried to make a living doing anything and everything I can. So, and it's a backward place. It's where the people who are the smartest and the most dynamic and the most creative are the ones who are doing all the work and getting no credit. People who are the dumbest. I mean, there's people who walked in there and they were a shoe salesman before they walked in there, and they figured out how to get in charge of a whole company. And it's just because the guy who's the head man in my facility has told them, this is our plan. It's a divide and conquer management style. You're on board with me, you're a yes man, or you're not doing anything. So anybody who was willing to set aside their integrity got to take a ride to the top with the head scumbag. And
resources are wasted, the taxpayers' money is wasted, and
sure.
I'm sure the atmosphere below senior management must be just awful. People are very unhappy.
And where I work, it's basically a call center. It's where people call when they've been into disaster. So the main job that you can get where I work is called a human service specialist. You're on the line and you're taking calls from people on their worst day of their life. Somebody just died, their home is destroyed, they're a mess. And so you have to have a lot of compassion in order to do something like that all day, and it really drains you. I've done it. I volunteered to do it. I couldn't get any of it on my reviews, but I volunteered to do it in every disaster. So I know exactly what it's like to do that job, and it's hard. And then they're the people who are blamed on everything. Take Katrina, for instance, which I wasn't there during Katrina, but once I got there, I was indoctrinated to what their version of Katrina is, and they said that the management said that it was the people on the floor who weren't doing things right. And the people on the floor say, well, they changed our guidelines every 3 minutes. So we didn't know what to go by. And so what's happened is there's been several where they try to get the money back from the people they gave money to in Katrina, and it's called recouping. And they've done that several times. And then Congress passed a bill that says that some people are exempt from it. And it's a whole lot of work. It's billions of dollars that have gone into just chaos, just chaos. The whole Katrina thing is still being paid for, and the people are still without houses.
It's shocking.
Yeah.
And you wrote an article about a month ago where you took on Professor Kevin Dutton. You actually challenged him on his Facebook page, and he patronized you big time. And you quite rightly brought up, you took him on certain issues. But what you're telling me is this proves that he's completely wrong in his ideas that psychopaths are the people you need in an emergency.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've personally spoke to people in Sandy who that's where the psychopaths go to. They go to the site where disaster is because that's when they can rob, steal, and take people on. I spoke to so many old people who got ripped off and thought they were going to get their benefits sooner because some jackass came to their door and told them that they were with, FEMA. But the people who are actually with FEMA too, who knows what they can do to take advantage of these people? It's unbelievable.
And then
we don't need them. We don't need them at all.
The warrior gene bullshit that he promotes. It's the parasite gene bullshit. Okay, in a situation of crisis, you need a warrior. You're never going to get a warrior in the terms of what's his name, that other professor, the one that wears the big sweater. I can't remember his name.
Fallon?
Right. Yeah,
the
Fallon
American
with his
Fallon,
with his fMRI traveling roadshow. He and his warrior gene bullshit pushes the same idea that the psychopath is needed in this situation. They don't have a warrior gene. They have a parasite gene. Yes, you need a warrior. Yes, you need doers. Yes, you need people who can take control during a situation like that. And you're just not going to get it from a psychopath. And this is this is this fallacy it's so important that people like yourself and others have picked up the baton that I grabbed there for a while and are moving it on, because we've got to demolish and we've got to put an end to this. Psychopaths are the best man for the crisis mantra that's certainly been put out there, because it's completely and utterly a fallacy. It's completely wrong.
Because in a crisis, the psychopath is serving their own needs, which is to manipulate, control, and dominate. And they're not doing anything for anyone else. A true warrior is a warrior in the sense of that Native teaches, which is the true warrior is willing to give up his or her life for the sake of the tribe. A psychopath is never going to do that, ever.
No, and a true warrior, even if you get outside the idea of
death,
fighting, it does it for the end process. It does it for the end process. A true consciousness warrior will say, we've got to solve this crisis because the community or the problem solved as soon as possible makes everything better for everyone. A psychopath, whether he's a senior manager, a politician, a president, or some lowlife on the ground who's going around the houses stealing things, is never going to solve the problem. Never. And this is, I mean, you and I both agree on the fact that this whole thing with Kevin Dutton and Fallon, these are the guys who've been put out there to shut down the information that fellas like me were pushing out there.
Right. Yeah, and they have to do it They have to do it in both the UK and America too. They have to do it simultaneously because we have the same, for lack of a better word, we have the same brand of psychopathology that's scaled up and controlling our societies. It's the same type of, I don't know what other word to put it, but brand of psychopathology.
Yeah, the Anglo-American parasite,
Yes.
That's rooted in that sort of like Anglo-Saxon, I don't mean Anglo-Saxon people, I mean the sort of like the English-speaking elitism, that crowd. That'd be a better way of putting it.
Right. And the reason we're never going to solve the problem with all the study of isms, racism, sexism, all the isms, that's just part of the picture, because really it has nothing to do with race or gender. It has to do with pathology. That's what's going to solve our problem. But they want us divided. They want us divided. Right.
I mean, even government agencies in America where they fill them full of quotas of minorities, that's not to help the minorities. That's to stir up divisions.
But they don't actually. I mean, they say they're doing that, but they're really not. They actually really aren't. I mean, there's every single person that is, in charge where I work is white. Every single one.
Swami has just joined us. Do you want to throw in, add to this part of the conversation, Swami?
Namaste and blessings. Kira, it's great to hear you. I've seen some of your stuff on Thomas's Facebook, and I welcome everyone, all the listeners all over the world, with great love and great respect with all of my heart.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. Swami, tell us about, and this is pertaining to Kira as well, tell us about, did you ever encounter psychopathology within the military? Among the regular guys. No, I know the generals. I mean, I know that's like asking you the diabetics in a suite.
Oh, even with the high ranking, within the American military structure, you have the non-commissioned officers, which are the NCOs, the sergeant levels, and I would have to say, if you're sitting, regardless what your field of specialty is, if you are sitting in a room with a guy with a whole bunch of stripes on his arm, the likelihood is it was his psychopathology which led him to that position.
So just
and
like
they function. Oh my God! It's just, a bunch of guys who are sitting around. Oh, and not everybody. Now that I did get to meet a few decent folks during my time, but so few. Most of them are like, hey, I've got the stripes. You just do what I say and be lucky I'm not writing you up for something,
Yeah. It's just it's the usual bureaucratic story. The bureaucracies and the pyramidal structure, no matter if it's in the military and teaching, anywhere, it rewards government, it rewards these predators. Can I ask you, totally. Kira, if you had power, I'd just like to throw this out there, and you could deal with this issue, how would you personally deal with it?
So if I had endless money, basically, I'd really want to take this to Indian country, because Indian country is really, really suffering in America. There's a lot of poverty. There's 80% unemployment on reservations, and I would, if I had an endless supply of money, I would build houses with solar panels and windmills, and so that people didn't freeze to death in the winter on the reservation. But I would also take this knowledge of psychopathology, because right now we have the American Indian movement that is basically psychopathology masquerading as Indian tradition. And so Indians are getting a triple whammy, because they're getting it from the overarching culture, the invading, colonizing culture, and they're getting it from within, from groups like AIM, who are completely psychopathically controlled. The whole organization is rife with psychopaths, and the whole way that it operates is a psychopathic entity. So they're getting it from within, without, and then it's corrupted the true traditions, and it's saying that what Indian tradition really is just a different version of American psychopathology. So I would take this knowledge there, and I would take this knowledge to centers where they're trying to help families who are suffering from domestic violence and things like that, and take it in there, because what happens in shelters is that women get in with a story that they've been abused, but they're really psychopaths, and they get in there and they take advantage of families that are already suffering because they don't have anywhere to go and they've been abused. And so I would take this knowledge so that those organizations can clean themselves up too. I would take it to all these organizations that are helping people so they can clean up their own messes, because the people are suffering now. So I would find a way to help. There's a lot of suffering, and just find a way to relieve that.
It always amazed us growing up in Ireland and the UK that America, with all, and I'm sure the rest of the world felt the same way, America with all its power and money and its advances. I'm talking about like back when it really was like the sugar daddy of the world. How you could have the poorest people, the natives, people who are living below third world conditions on their own soil, and not have a hint of irony about it.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and it's horrible because you have the real knowledge, the elders who are dying now. They have to live in a certain way. If you're a medicine person, you're appointed by your community, and anybody who comes to you for help, you help them, whether they can give you a chicken or they can give you tobacco, whether they can give you a few bucks or not, you have to help them. So there are medicine people who have this, centuries of knowledge that's going to die with them, and they're subsisting on, scraps. I mean, literal scraps. Apples that are falling off the orchard next door into their, yard. Stuff like that is going on. It's unacceptable.
Well, and Kira, have you noticed how they'll, on the res, sometimes you can get a house. I know a few people on different reses, and you can get a brick home, but then you get in and you have no curtains, you have no furniture, you have no, you know what I mean? It's just,
and you have no way, and your heat gets turned off in the winter when it's 50 below zero. People freeze to death every year on the reservation because of that, because they will shut their electricity off, and that's inhuman. That's a psychopathically controlled structure.
Just business.
And
from the attack on the natives, not just in America. I mean, in AD 60, Suetonius Paulinus and his Roman legions crossed the Menai Straits in Wales to massacre the last of the British Druids. It's been happening everywhere. In India, when the East India Company first got to India, they were overwhelmed by how India was almost a paradise compared to Europe at the time. There was no beggars, no poverty. This is the British own observations. A high education, a high standard of society and culture, and the British East India Company determined the only way we're ever going to conquer India is by teaching them English, bringing them into our system, and then destroying them from within. And that's exactly what happened. Anywhere there's a native wisdom, anywhere on this planet, if they found them on the moon, they'd be launching the spaceships out to get them, no matter what it was.
Right, because
if there was some resource under their feet.
But the resource is only half it. They do not want a different form of consciousness on this planet that does not tie in with their psychopathic control hierarchical model. They just don't want it.
Right, because indigenous wisdom teaches that there's always enough for everyone as long as you share. And consciousness parasites don't want to share. That's their whole gig. They want it all for themselves, So it doesn't have anything to do with race, though. It has to do with indigenous versus non-indigenous. And the history of the world is the history of psychopathically controlled cultures taking over indigenous cultures that are non-psychopathically controlled. That is the history of the world. And it doesn't have anything to do with race.
From Mesoamerica to Asia to North America, everywhere.
Yeah. Everywhere. And I think we can look at what's going on now for Native Americans, and we can extrapolate that backwards in history to think about what was going on for the Druids, because I bet it was, the same challenges that they were facing then, that we face now.
Well, that's the Irish. I mean, not to say that we've suffered in the same level now, but in the past, the same was done in Ireland through the British Empire. I mean, I always maintained that potatoes and whiskey were imported bioweapons that were later exported to the high sugar, high starch, high carbohydrate diet coupled with alcohol was then exported to the United States. And the Cromwellian invasion of Ireland was the test model for what they exported to the West Indies and then later to the United States. Keep them sluggish,
the test model.
flabby, malnourished, and get them drunk.
Right, and now the diabetes.
Yeah, and the whiskey was specific.
Epidemic.
The whiskey was an import because
whiskey
they
speeds up that diabetic process too.
Yeah, because
it'll speed it up real fast.
Natives had their own beer, they had their own mead, their own alcohol that was
right.
brewed not in the same intense way that whiskey is. And I've no doubt that whiskey was used by the psychopathic control grid of the British Empire on the Scots and the Irish to get rid of them. I've no doubt about that. And they brought the same method everywhere. It was bio-warfare. They were slow-kill bioweapons.
Oh, yes.
They're dealing with
completely.
the same lineage of pathology.
And the thing that they fear the most is us. We can using the internet to all connect with each other and to share our indigenous wisdom that we still have inside us.
Yeah, well, we're the return of the native. That's what we are. What you call this awakened movement, these people waking up to the psychopathic control grid. It doesn't matter what spiritual tradition, they're atheists, what social class, what nation. We're all agreeing on this subject. We're all agreeing, and we're not arguing about it. And this has to frighten the shit out of them. It has to be terrifying. We do not argue. I've yet to encounter people who argue about the psychopathic issue. No matter what the issue, the background is, what the spiritual or atheist or anything, political or social class, everyone says to me, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And the only ones who argue a bit about it would be and I have to say it's extremely rare, would be some trumped up guy who wants to know why I don't have a degree in it. And he's easily dismissed very quickly because he's just trying to show off his academic credentials. But it doesn't last long. But this is the issue and even they will begrudgingly agree on it. We are the natives. We are the return of the new nation.